first tune we're going to work on today is a very cool tune from Czechoslovakia called Annie Went Down to the Cabbage Patch. It's got a title like a Don Petty special, uh, Possum Up a Gump Stump, or what's the one I really like? Uh, I love my wife as well as everybody, but now she goes around hugging everybody. That's an actual tune that he teaches. It's got that kind of a flavor to it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to open up Annie Went Down to the Cabbage Patch. Now I'm going to share this screen. I'm going to share computer sound. We're going to go via AirPlay on the iPad. And then I'm going to swipe over on the iPad, do screen mirroring. And when that does the connect, here we have the music for Annie Went Down to the Cabbage Patch. So we are in the key of D, two sharps, F sharp and C sharp. Let me get into markup mode here. Okay. And we'll got the color red all situated. Okay. All right, so we are in the key of D, and we've got our F sharp and C sharp there. And then we are also in 4/4 time. That top number is how many beats are in the measure, and the bottom number is what gets that beat, and the 4 stands for the quarter note. So we know that the quarter note gets the beat. Whenever I learn a tune from tablature or from standard music notation, before I play it, what I like to do is I like to walk through it and assess the situation, get an idea of what I'm going to be doing, and kind of plan my attack so that there are no surprises when I actually start playing the tune. So here's what I look at. First of all, we've already looked at our key signature D, and we've already looked at our time signature, which is 4/4. The next step is to look at navigation. How do we move through the piece? Are there repeats? Are there first and second endings? And we do not have any repeats here, and we don't have any first and second endings, but we do have two clearly marked parts, the A part and the B part. The A part lasts for 4 measures, as well as the B part. The B part lasts for 4 measures, and then we'll repeat as we go around. So that's very, very simple. The next thing we look at is we go measure by measure and take a look at the rhythms and the notes and start getting an idea of how we want to approach this. So what I'll do is I'll stop sharing this. I'm going to check the chat. Actually, let me see what I've got going on up here. I see a couple of numbers. Okay, I'm going to go into the chat here in a little bit and see what we've got going on there. But right now, I want you to go ahead and take the time, and I'll join you here in a second. But go measure by measure and start plotting what fingers you're going to use on what strings. Now this is I wouldn't call it a fiddle tune, but it's not a ballad by any means. This is an active piece of music that probably has a dance associated with it. It sounds, I mean, it's Czechoslovakian, but it sounds very Dutch to me for some reason, and you'll hear that when we start playing it, especially in the B part. So we don't have to worry too much about trying to maintain a sustain. And what I mean by that is with slower tunes, with the mountain dulcimer only having 3 strings, the objective is to try and keep at least 1 string sustaining at all times to give us coverage for making those chord changes and not having everything stop at once, because that creates choppiness. But we don't have to worry about that with an energetic tune. So what we're looking for now is just trying to keep our fingers on the same string as much as possible so we don't have to continue changing our grip in order to play. Now we only have we really only have full chords, closed chords in measure 4. We have a 3-3-5 and then a 3-3-4. And then we've got some closed chords in the B section in measure 6 and 7. And then the rest of this is open chords. Let's talk about that for a second, what they mean. An open chord means that you have at least one string that you're not touching. So it's serving as a drone, kind of, but it really is a part of the chord. So an open chord, for example, would be, a 103 chord, which you see on beat number 2 of measure 4. That's an A7 chord. That's a version of an A7 chord that we can play. So we're not doing anything on the middle string. We're leaving that open. But if we were to take our fingers on the first fret, bass string, third fret on the melody string, and nothing on the middle string, and then we moved our fingers up the fretboard, pretty soon that chord would sort of disintegrate. It wouldn't be a chord anymore. It would be parallel harmonies like this. So the fabric of the chord begins to fall apart. It's still pretty what we're doing, but with an open chord, that's what happens. If you move that shape, it starts, all the intervals start to kind of get further and further apart from each other inside the chord. A closed chord is one in which we are actually pressing down on all 3 strings. So if we move that chord, for example, 3-3-5, that L-shaped G major chord on the downbeat of measure 4, if we move this shape upwards and keep the L shape, we'll get a number of different types of chords where the intervals are roughly the same. We'll get a combination of major chords and minor chords. And that would be a closed chord. So it's going to maintain the distance between notes more or less. That middle note in each chord will change because of the way our fretboard is laid out. But we don't actually change the distances with our fingers. We keep that shape moving up and down the fretboard. And that's the difference between open chords and closed chords. So a lot of the chords that we play in the first 3 fret range are open chords. We can get by with just using 1 finger or 2 finger to get those chords. And a lot of people love playing in this open position because you don't have to press down on all the strings. Ukuleles have an open position, guitars have an open position, and the mountain dulcimer has an open position. That's largely in the first 3 frets. When we start getting above that, then we have to close those chords up in order for them to sound correct. And that requires a little bit more effort, but not nearly as much as guitars, banjos, and ukuleles. All right. So what we're going to do here is we're going to move through and just try and keep our fingers on the same strings so we don't have to switch in the middle of a phrase or an awkward point in the measure. And the question you want to ask yourself is, when you're in the measure, ask yourself how you got there, what fingers you used to get there, and then where you're going to go to get into the next measure. Are you going to keep the finger that you got on the melody string, or do you need to switch it up because there's something happening in that next measure that's going to require you to make that change? It's this sort of thoughtful process that will help you to make informed decisions before you actually do the first run through. Now, if you're like me, I get a new piece of music and I'm so excited, I want to go ahead and start playing it. What happens though is as you sight read it, you're going to have to make decisions on the fly, and you might not make the right choices all the time. And you may bobble a note, or you might land something with a thud. Unfortunately, muscle memory, the process of developing that muscle memory has already begun, which means that bobble has now been entered into your organic computer, and now you have to forget it. You have to get rid of it and put the right info in there. So I believe in not taking 10 steps forward and then 9 steps backward. I'd rather be able to play this with assurance, consistency, and accuracy the first time I go through. And that's why we're kind of taking the time thoughtfully, a word that you're going to hear a lot this week. Be thoughtful in the process and consider all of your alternatives. Do I want to use my fingers this way, or well, let me try it this way. Oh, that works a lot better. That's what I'll do when I play through the piece for the first time. So I'm going to stop sharing and open up the view that's going to show you the mountain dulcimer from the top. And I'm going to need real quick to go over to Minicam and restart my inset camera. So I'm going to get rid of it, and now I'm going to add it right back in. And now I'm going to flip right back over to Zoom. And now we should have that working. And I'll get myself positioned and the camera positioned so that you can see everything nice and clear. You guys don't really need to see the tuning head there. There we go. All right. Let's go measure by measure and take a look at some things here. Measure number 1, easy peasy. Now, I'm not a big fan of putting a whole bunch of zeros to indicate that nothing is being played on the bass string and on the middle string. I think it just kind of clutters up the tablature. So let it be known that that's drone. We're going to be playing on the melody string against the drone at that point. So that's pretty simple. Whatever finger you like to use, or multiple fingers on the melody string, is going to get us through that first measure. Now here's our first decision. Once again, I'm not putting zeros on the bass string at the second measure, but you are going to go ahead and use that bass drone as we play our harmonies. So we've just come off the melody string and we've got some things that are going to be happening on the melody string in the second measure. But notice on the middle string, what we're doing there is basically what fiddles do when they are playing a melody. They're bringing a bit of a harmony drone into the picture. So the decision here is, what can you do to make sure that you are able to play the melody while at the same time still holding on to that middle string to give you the harmony for the drone. The way I'm doing it, or the way I like to do it, is I'm a thumb player, and the thumb gives you a great reach, melodic reach. So I'm going to use my thumb, and generally speaking, you want to use the finger that is going to be the easiest, and that's going to be the closest in proximity to that fret. And for me, that's the index finger. It's right there. It's just hovering above the 3rd fret, looking for something to do. So I can just move it down a little bit, and I've got the access to the 2nd fret there. And then I can move it up to the 3rd fret. The thing about this is that the melody is moving down, and then you have to shift upwards on that middle string, and then the melody is going to move down again in a different location. So it's going to look like this the way I'm playing it. Now you might have noticed here what I did was I started off with my thumb on the melody string, but I did trade. I just passed the baton to my middle finger, which is going to be in a better position to land at the 2nd fret on the melody string. I'll play it again and I'll show you where this transfer of power takes place. So I'm starting off at the beginning of the 2nd measure. Now I'm going to move the index finger and the thumb together up to 3/4 like this. Very easy lateral move. Now right here, I could take my thumb and move it down to the 3rd fret, but that just doesn't even feel comfortable to me. It's a lot easier for me to take the middle finger, which is just hovering there waiting to be put into the game, to drop it down at the 3rd fret and then move it down to the 2nd fret. So I'm going. Not a lot of movement going on there, and that's exactly what we're looking for. We're trying to minimize what we're doing as far as moving and relocating our fingers, and trying to maximize the amount of time we spend on one string so that we don't break things up too much. So I'll do that again. I know a lot of teachers will put down indicators on what fingers to use, and I did that maybe 1 or 2 times in my first book, and then I realized that that wasn't a great idea because not everybody's hands are built the same. And anybody who has seen Tull Glazner's hands knows this to be true, because Tull Glazner can palm a basketball. His fingers are like 10 inches long. So what may work for him in one, and people who've got big hands will use that to their advantage. But if you write that out in your tab and you don't make it so that people with ordinary size fingers can play it, then it's not going to be a fun tab to play. So I try and keep things as simple as possible. So whatever fingers you want to use, whichever is going to be easiest for you, whatever is going to get the job done, I don't want to tell you these are the fingers you have to use. You're going to come up with your own grip to get those chords and get those results. All right, so we go to the third measure, which is basically just like the first measure, so we don't have to cover that again. And then we get to our first closed chords in measure number 4. So we've got an L-shaped chord, 3-3-5 for G major. Then the melody is going to come down 1 fret to 4. And here's what I do to get the 1-0-3 chord. My thumb is at the 4, so it only has to go down 1 fret. And it's on the same string, ideal. My index finger is at the 3rd fret, and so if I slide it down to the 1st fret on the bass string, I'm keeping it on the same string as well, and I've got my 1-0-3 A7 chord. And so all together, that's going to look and sound like this. Very, very easy lateral movement. And we keep our fingers on the same strings. We don't have to play finger switcheroo. And then we wrap things up with a 2 on the melody string and let everything else go. And that is the A part. Now let me see something here. Okay, so let me play through the A part slowly. And this is kind of an odd little tune. It's a rare song, and I don't know that I've ever heard it in a jam, and I don't know that many people know it. So being able to hear it over and over again and get the melody and chords in your head, it's going to help you to internalize the tune. If you hum it, if you can hum it, you'll be able to play it a lot better. So let me go ahead and play through here nice and slow. And I'll play it again. All right. Anybody having any trouble at this point? Anybody still trying to come up with some options? Or is this flowing pretty smooth so far? Now I've got everybody. Yeah, go ahead.
This is Linda. I have a question about your strumming. I think you were just strumming out. So how fast is this supposed to go? And should we go back and forth with the 8th notes?
With the 8th notes, correct. This tune, I still have not been able to find a live recording of it or a recording of it. But when we get it up to speed, you'll see this is definitely a little dance tune for sure. It's not lickety split, but it's not slow by any means. And yes, you'll definitely want to use the alternating pick direction. Typically, when I'm playing super, super slow, there is a feeling that there's no hurry and I don't have to conserve myself too much. And so I do tend to just outstrum. But when I get this up to speed, when it comes down to those 8 notes, I'll go back and forth. But the way I'm thinking about it now, when I play this up to speed, I think I'm outstrumming just because, again, there's no immediate need. I don't feel the immediate need uh, to conserve strums. That alternating pick direction is really helpful if you've got something moving so quickly that it's difficult to go outstrum. I find this tune not to be really difficult with the outstrum. And of course, it's a lot more difficult to use alternating pick direction when you're moving slowly. It's a little harder to play consistent that way. So I do tend to outstrum on this one now that I think about it. But I also don't play it totally smoking fast either. Anybody having any issues at all with the A part? Okay, that's good. And the timing is pretty much it's pretty basic. We got 8 notes, we got some quarter notes, we got 1/2 note there in the fourth measure. Same thing with measures 5, 6, and 7. But then we've got a little hitch in our get along that happens in measure number 8. So let's take a look at that. What we've got is on the downbeat of measure 8, we've got a dotted 8th note. And normally if you bring a dot into the picture, and a dot is basically adding half of the value of the note to itself. So if half of an 8th note is a 16th note, and there are 2 16th notes in an 8th note, and we've got a dotted 8th note, that means we now have a total of 3 16th notes that we're holding it. Whenever you see a dot, that means that we've stolen that, we've borrowed that from another note. That means that another note somewhere in that measure is going to be altered. And normally, in stuff like this, it shows up in the very next note. And that's exactly what's happening right here. And that is on the of the first beat. If we were to subdivide measure 8, connected in brackets from the first beat, those 2 notes there live in beat number 1. Those 2 8th notes that follow it live inside of beat number 2. The next pair of 8 notes lives inside of beat number 3. And that final quarter note is beat number 4. So what we've got in that second note there, that's a 16th note. How do we know that? If you look above that second note, you'll see sticking out a partial bar. If you have 2 8th notes and you connect them together, you're going to have 1 bar there. If you've got a group of 4 16th notes all stuck together, they're connected with 2 bars. But if you've got one sneaky little 16th note hanging out, trying not to be noticed in a group of 8 notes, we can see that it's there because above that note there will be a partial bar showing that that's actually 2 bars above that note, indicating that that is a 16th note. That sneaky little bugger just hanging out there. So that rhythm, dotted 8th note, 16th note, is commonly known as a shuffle. If this is straight 8 notes, then a combination of the dotted 8th note and 16th note would sound like this. It's got kind of a flat tire feeling, and that shuffle is important for a lot of different tunes, even if we're playing it and don't realize that that's what the notation would look like. In fact, a lot of people, say for example, take a look at measure 1, instead of writing everything as a dotted 8 16th note combo, they will simply write at the beginning of the tune, played with a swing, so that you don't have to look at all those dots and 16th notes and make your eyes cross, But here, it's not being used to create a shuffle. Here it is creating a change in rhythm for the melody. So if you're looking at that and you're not quite sure how to approach these dotted 8 16th note combinations, I will introduce to you a technique that I use and have been using for a number of years called pulsing. And this is a way of figuring out how a particular rhythm is supposed to be played. Pulsing involves looking at a measure like measure number 8 and first of all finding out what the smallest unit of rhythmic measure is. What's the smallest note duration inside of measure 8? It's our friend the 16th note. We have to be able to account for it, and so we have to use the smallest note. If there wasn't an 8th note there or a 16th note there, we'd be able to use an 8th note. But since that 1/16th note is there, we do have to use 16th notes. So real quick, let's just refresh our memory again about the 8th note. The 8th note, there are 2 16th notes inside of it. And the quarter note, there are 4 16th notes inside of one quarter note. So here's how this works. Pulsing means we're going to be clapping our hand one time for each 16th note, whether it be inside of an 8th note, or whether it's one clap for the 16th note by itself, or 4 claps for the 4 16th notes inside of the quarter note. And we clap through, and what we do is every single time we get to a new note event, we move forward into the measure, we're going to clap a little bit louder. We're going to give it an accent, so then we can very clearly hear how that is moving along. So we're going to start off with 3 claps because we've got a dotted 8th note. So there's already 2 16th notes inside of the 8th note, and we've added another one by nature of adding that dot. So 3 claps for the downbeaten 1, 2, 3. And the 16th note count is 1, E, and So it would be wrong to say that that 16th note is on beat number 2, because it's not. That beat is actually on the of 1. 1, E, and That's where it lives right there. Because beat 2, the second beat, is actually, or the second part of that is actually where the dot is located. We've started it and bundled it into the downbeat. So for the first note event, clap 3 times for the 16th note. 1, 2, 3, 3 16th notes. Moving to the next one, we have 1 16th note, 1 clap. Next we have an 8th note, so 2 claps for those 16th notes inside of that 8th note. Next 8th note, 2 claps. Beat 3, 2 claps for the 16th notes inside of that 8th note. 2 more claps for that 8th note, and 4 claps for the quarter note, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we're going to go loud every time we move to a new note event. 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Dun, 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 bum. And so we have to go a little bit faster to be able to hear the rhythm. 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 E and a. So dum, bum, 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 bum. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Bum, bum, bum. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum. And after a while, you can stop doing the clapping once you get a feel for those accents and you can hear the rhythm. Bum, 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 bum. And that is how pulsing works. This really, really helps out if you've got a lot of these types of combinations of dotted notes and other notes, and there's a shifting sort of rhythm going back and forth. And if you can't read it right off the bat, you can pulse through it and get a sense for it. In time, you'll start looking down and seeing certain rhythm combinations, and because you've played it so many times before, you'll just be able to jump right into it and it won't even be a problem for you. But as you're getting used to some of these different rhythms, pulsing helps to let you know basically how to move through that. So I wanted to touch on that before we actually went and started playing around with the chords. So we had the rhythm foundation first, and then we can lay that other stuff on top of it. So starting with measure 5, beginning of the B section, we're starting off on the melody string, and then we're going to end up going into a 101 A chord. So I'm going to use my thumb, and when I'm done with the melody on the first 2 beats of the measure, I'm going to slide it down to 1 and keep it there, and then add my index finger in on the bass string. Okay, then in measure number 6, I'm going to do a bar at the 4th fret. Now the thing about the bar, I'm sure many of you know this already, is that we're touching on every single string from bass to middle to melody. You don't really want to use the tips of your fingers because that can be awkward. So you kind of want to use the pads of your fingers. And you also want to curl your fingers a little bit as opposed to just having them straight up. First of all, this puts your arm in a better position. And second, if anybody holds their fingers up like this, nobody's fingers are like straight across really. They got a little thing happening here, differences of length. But if you curl your fingers, you can see that they all pretty much end up equalized. So if you put those fingers using your pads across the bar there, across the 4th fret, with your palm facing down towards the fretboard, not only is it a lot easier to hold down all 3 strings, but your thumb is now in position to come up and play melody. So what we're doing here is we're playing the bar. The thumb comes in at the 5, and then take the thumb away, and then go down to 2. Now I want you to watch what I do when I go down to 2. Watch what finger I use. So I use my ring finger. Why? Because, you know, I love my thumb, and I'll use my index finger too. So why am I using my ring finger? I would not play an entire song with my ring finger. I'm using it because coming out of the bar, my ring finger is already on that string. Why would I want to take my finger off of there and switch to the thumb? I could tuck my thumb there and slide it down. But for me, for that one moment in time, it's a lot easier just to slide the ring finger down there. I'm not going to be down there very long, just a couple of beats. And then I can take that ring finger off. Or what I'll do, since I'm, going to measure 7 and playing a 5-5-7 L-shaped B minor chord, I can then from the 2 slide this up to 5 and then just drop in the rest of my bar 5 and then drop in my thumb at 7. And this brings up something that I'd like to mention. The L-shaped chord typically is going to be, if you're playing it like this, index finger on the bass string, middle finger on the middle string, and then thumb on the melody string. And, that thumb, that's the highest pitch note right there in this chord, and you're not going to hear anything behind that. So why am I going to slide my ring finger from 2 up to 5 for that bar? We're not going to hear what's happening there on the melody string at the 5th fret. I like to bar all of my L-shaped chords because at some point in time you will run into a situation where you're playing this L-shaped chord where the melody starts to move towards the bar. And before you know it, the melody is right there at the bar. And if you haven't barred across that lower part of the L shape, you're going to have to throw that ring finger down in there anyway. And that's just extra motion in the middle of trying to move and negotiate the piece that you shouldn't even have to bother with. It happens more often than not that I will need to just lift my thumb and have that note at the 5th fret ready to go. And so I bar all of my L-shaped chords in preparation for that. And the ring finger, which turns out to be one of the great MVPs, MVFs, uh, that ring finger, say the melody not only bounces down from, I'm going to use this G major chord as an example, 3-3-5. So I'm barred all the way to the 3rd fret. So the melody's on the 5th fret, and then it comes down to the 4th fret. And then it comes down to the 3rd fret, so I lift my thumb, and then the melody keeps going. It goes to the 2nd fret. I'm all busy here playing this bar at the 3, so the ring finger can continue down and get the 2nd fret. And then if that nefarious melody continues to move downwards, I got a couple of options. I can do my best to get the ring finger down there. Tain't happening for me, but I can certainly get a pinky down there. And then that is where the pinky comes in. I would not, again, play an entire tune using the ring finger and the pinky. They're not as strong as the middle finger, the index finger, or the thumb. But in a tight spot where you don't want to let go of what's happening on the bass string and the middle string at any cost, they can pinch hit. They can get in there and they can do the job. And if you can bear with yourself just long enough to get through that measure, everything will return to normal once you can kind of reset your grip and move from there. So if you're not used to using your ring finger, and if you're not used to using your pinky, it's a good thing to start using those as an alternative to taking your fingers off and doing something different. What I'm trying to do desperately is hang on to the sustain I've already got going on the bass string and on the middle string. Look what happens to the position of my hand as I get down to that 2nd fret with my pinky. The wrist is already shifted back towards me, and I'm actually pivoting a little bit on my index finger and on my middle finger. There's a bit of a pivot going on there. And then when I go to get that number 1 fret, notice how much my wrist has just swung out towards the head of the instrument. I am working extra hard to try and keep that bass string and that middle string ringing and sustaining, because if I take my fingers off of them for whatever reason, they're going to choke, they're going to stop. So it's a little bit of self-sacrifice, and the more you do it, the easier it gets. When you first start doing it, your hands, your fingers, they will hate you. They will hate you. They won't talk to you for a week. But the more you use them, the more you can put them in the game at these key moments when you're trying very hard to keep that sustain going. So let's take that back up to 5-5-7. And I explained all that, and we're not going to even use it in this tune, but I wanted to plant that seed because it'll be coming up. Measure 7, we've got our 5-5-7. Easy lateral move just to shift that whole thing down to 3-3-5. And then measure 8 with the rhythm that we just worked on. So my index finger is on 3. It's going to stay on the bass string and shoot down to 1 at the same time that my thumb is going to move down 1 fret from the 5th to the 4th. And then the thumb walks down the rest of the way. And then our final 3 notes are open. And that is the B part. So let me go ahead and play the B part a couple of times here for you. You can probably hear our dog Roscoe making himself known right now. They're picking up our recyclables, and he loves the driver of the truck, and they're dumping our thing right now, and Roscoe's out there just barking his face off. All right, so here is the B part. And I will play that one more time. This is the B part. One thing I want to cover that I didn't is the transition between the end of measure 5 and the beginning of measure 6, going from the 101 chord to the bar 4. So obviously with the 101 chord, I am using my thumb on the melody string. Index finger is on the bass string and nothing on the middle string. So as far as consistency, the index finger is going to stay on that string and come to 4. But my thumb is not going to be a part of this bar, and these fingers need to drop in. So what I do is as I move up, when I drop my thumb off of the melody string and start sliding that index finger up, when it gets to about where it needs to be, the other fingers just kind of come in like a landing gear. They unlock, they get into position, and I land there at the 4th fret. So from 101, remove the thumb, slide up, and when you are in the vicinity, bring those landing gear up, down, and there's your 4. And I'll do that again. There at the 4th fret. I'll talk about this very briefly, but we'll bring this into play when we play through it a few times. I'm going to do this 2 different ways. I want you to notice the difference. I'm going to play it this way, and then I'm going to play it a different way. So. Okay. So you heard that bass string go through as I slid up there, and you also heard those other 2 strings sort of stay open. Okay, that's one way to do it. Then there's this way. Oh, what was that? What happened? Where'd all the sound go? What happened? The right hand has come down with a palm mute, and I've come down here at the strings, and I've actually stopped all of the strings from ringing while I reposition my hand. No noise, no slide, no nothing, and then. So why do I want to mute like that? One, to mask the sound of strings that you've just taken your finger off of, and that would ring. Like we just played this 101 chord. If I just willy-nilly take my thumb off of there, I might sound the D as I'm trying to come up here to this, and it just might get a little noisy. So the right hand palm mute comes in handy to help give you some space to move. The other reason is for effect, you know. And when we play through this thing, we're going to play it through without doing any of that. But then we're going to use the right hand palm mute to give it more of a perky, peppy sound. We're going to play a lot of this stuff staccato as opposed to letting the notes and the chords ring out. And it puts a different sort of energy into the tune, and it's a lot of fun. And it's something that you can do very easily just by taking the heel of your hand and muting those strings. And also, with the left hand, bouncing your fingers on the notes. All right, let's see now. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and I'm going to play the whole thing so you can get an idea of how it all sounds together, and then we'll go ahead and we'll play through it. All right, Annie went down to the cabbage patch. B part. again. B part. It's such a happy, peppy, poppy little thing. I just love this tune. And you can tell it's just got kind of a little Dutch feeling. Dun, dee, da, dun, dum, 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 dum. It's not quite a polka, but it's something very, very close. So let's go ahead and put this thing on Uber repeat and play through it a few times. So when we get to that last measure, we're just going to flip it right around and go ahead and play it through again. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Let me do this with the 8-note count. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Round again. That was my bad. Again. B part. All right, let's take a short break. Take your fingers and wiggle them around a little bit. Always a good idea not only to warm up before you play, but take a little finger break every now and again. We're not doing a whole lot of heavy lifting here, but we are all at risk for small repetitive motor injury. And we do a lot of this anyway, you know, on Facebook and whatnot. And then after you're done playing, do a cool down as well, just like you would if you were going to work out and jog in the park or what have you. Let's go ahead and play that around a couple more times. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. One more time. All right, that's such a cute little tune. Now let's talk about what you would do when you wanted to pick it up a little bit in tempo, and also how to put a different kind of personality to it. When it comes down to providing more energy into a tune rhythmically, we're doing fill-in strums. And before we even get to that point, we should really be looking at the melody, because that is where our rhythmic inspiration is going to come from. It's going to be, well, every song has its own rhythmic fingerprint, and it does come from the melody, the organization of whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, eighth notes, and 16th notes, but mainly it's going to be the note durations that move the most: quarter notes, eighth notes, and 16th notes. These half notes and these whole notes, they can create part of a rhythm, but they happen over such a wider period of time. Like a whole note. A whole note in a very busy rhythm is a sustain more than anything else. It's not really a, this is how we move and groove. It's more of a, this is how we hold it out. And it's when we see those clear notes that the rhythm needs some assistance. Otherwise, everything comes to a dead halt. Well, there's not a lot of room for that in this tune. It's got a lot of action going on. Eighth notes, one little 16th note. It's got one half note. That is where I would do a little something to give it a lift. Otherwise, it is moving and grooving on its own, and it does not need a whole lot of help to make it really engaging. But there are two things that you can do. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to play this as if I were playing it in a jam somewhere, which I hope to someday. You guys all got to learn this tune, so if I call the tune somewhere, we can all play it together and maybe teach other people how to play it. Two things I'm going to do. One is I'm going to add accents on 2 and 4. This automatically puts a different sort of a groove into things without you having to add actual extra rhythms and stuff like that. That would be like, instead of me just playing I would play beats 2 and 4 a little bit louder, like this. These are 4 quarter notes. And now I'll put accents on 2 and 4. See how it's got a bit more of a groove to it. So if I apply that to this tune, sorry. Already it's got more of a, you want to dance to it, boom, ba, dum, ba, dum, ba, dum, ba. And this works for any song that's got a lot of energy to it. Just putting accents on 2 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. The other thing I'm doing is I'm shorting some of these notes and making them more staccato. So here's me playing it with everything kind of wide open. Now I'm going to make some of these notes, melodies, and chords a bit more staccato, and watch what happens. By creating some of these spaces in between these notes and taking a little bit of that drone out there, it actually develops even more of an energy. So that also gives you an option when playing it over and over again a few times, is to play it long and then shorten it up and then play it long. And that way you've got some more dynamics of energy going on with the piece. One more thing is Not so much a fill-in rhythm, but it is like a counterpoint. Basically, it's a rhythmic counterpoint. You'll see me coming back against the bass string every now and again, instead of doing a fill-in rhythm. They're kind of arbitrary and they're kind of not. It's basically when the melody chills out a little bit, it's just giving me another bit of counterpoint and only on the bass string. I'm coming in against that bass string and playing the dulcimer a bit more dynamically as far as not all strings all the time, but a little bit happening on the melody and this thing is ringing and then coming back against that bass string. So let me do the whole thing again. I'm going to try and slow it down so you can watch what's happening every little additional bit and see how this thing is coming together. Now right there at the end of measure 4, we got that half note, and whenever you see a clear note, that's where that melody has paused. And anything longer than a beat and a half, 2 beats, is where if you don't do something, there's a big hole after all this energy we've built up. And that's a perfect time to add in a little extra something. So instead of just coming back against the bass string, I do kind of a, you know, I actually get a bum, ba bum in that last part of measure 4. Notice I don't do a whole lot of that in the B part because I think that melody or that rhythm is so definitive. There's something that feels like there was a dance that went along with this tune. Don't you get that idea? Something about that suggests motion of some sort, dip and sway and move, and so I'm trying to accent that. The bottom line with adding in this extra stuff is to do it where you feel necessary. If you think the tune needs a little bit of assistance, pop it on in there, but don't think about it too much. If you want to play it straight without doing any of that stuff, that's cool. But if you're like, you know, I could do something else, experiment with some of those things. Accents on 2 and 4, coming back against the bass string every now and again. Whatever it is, it really should be born out of necessity. It should be born out of you needing this to happen to make you feel good about how you're playing this tune. If I tell you to do something and you have to remember what it was I told you to do and you don't feel like it was even necessary, it's one more thing rolling around in your head that you probably don't even need up there. But if you feel like, you know what, I could probably do a little something like that, let it be born of necessity because you feel like it needs to be done. And whatever it is, try it. Whatever you think is going to get the results you're looking for, give it a shot and throw it, throw it against the wall, see if it sticks. If it does, go for it. If it doesn't, try a different approach. Do less of it, do more of it, whatever it takes to breathe some life into the tune. Learning the notes, the melodies, the chords is only a small part of the journey. The rest of it is playing it in a way that infuses it with life and emotion and color and energy where it creates a picture in your mind. And that's when a song really and truly comes to life.